Hello, I'm Chris from Airwindows, and we're going to do some more coding today. Going to be a bit of a weird day for a variety of reasons. I am juggling the flu shot and COVID shot, and as one might imagine, feeling a little bit under the weather, but not so much that I'm not willing to stream over it. So we're going to do that. And I'm a little distracted by at least rumors of current events, some of which are charming and some of which are less. I'll tell you what I heard, and then I'm going to go and start focusing on coding and stuff. One of the things that apparently happened is this guy from Florida, Matt Gaetz, withdrew his attempt to be Attorney General, and that's interesting. That is, he wasn't a good choice, honestly. So that is a interesting thing. Another interesting thing is apparently Ukraine announced that they had an ICBM shot at them, which is something of an escalation, because those are normally nuclear. And clearly, if it was one of those, it didn't work, which doesn't surprise me terribly much. And also, it doesn't necessarily have to be one of those, and more will be revealed. So that's what greeted me as I got ready to do my streaming. So if I seem a little bit distracted, it's because I have many questions about the world we're in. I am also in the new chair, which you can't really see unless I bounce over to this other camera where you still can't really see it, but I got the new chair. It was supposed to not have arms because I'm a guitar player and didn't want it to have arms, and it arrived with arms, which get in the way of I don't know, getting bombed with nukes is very interesting, but hopefully that's not what happened to anybody. The arms of this chair mean I can't rotate it the way that I normally would, so I'll sort of do my best with it and see what I can do. Although one nice side effect of that, apparently arms on chairs are good, because if I just sit in the chair with my elbows on these arms, it's taking like weight off of my shoulders and it's taking weight off of the small of my back. Might actually lead to me being in better shape for the long run. So I don't know whether I'm going to go whole hog in trying to remove these arms, which wouldn't be that difficult, but I don't have the right tools for it. Or whether maybe I'll go and find arms for the other chair. Because, I am a guitar player and all, but a lot of the stuff that I'm doing isn't really guitar oriented. And a lot of the stuff that I could do playing guitars, they have straps I could stand. So it is many things to think about. And one of them is going to be, let's see if this works. It does. Also, the new chair is much creakier than the extremely old one, and that's really weird. You'd think that the new one would not be creaky, but apparently it is. So we're just going to all live with that together. So what we're looking at here, and I can't scooch in as close as I otherwise would because the arm is in the way, but I'll see whether that poses a problem. We are looking at this set of adjustments and things. You can see that here there are no continuous variables to be updated. It is only setting FPD, which is the floating point tether. But it doesn't have to do a thing other than just calculate some stuff. And I've got it busted down into some of this is mysterious. And by that I mean I thought this divisor thing, which is scaling the gain up and down, I thought that was going to operate on this basis, but it doesn't seem to, and I'm not exactly sure why. I also don't know whether I'm going to make a single final output or, because here's the thing, that I tried the ×2 and ×4, and then I tried it ×8. And ×8 did not help. It produced a weird sort of side effect. And so I just scaled it back and tried it ×6, and that ended up producing something really interesting. And it's available, and so I'm going to fire up long sign, I guess, again, and we'll have a look at it. And I'm going to try to aim the microphone more at me because I have to sit farther away from it this time. I have a nasty tendency of popping into the microphone and causing these big thumps, so maybe we're just as well not being... Let's see what I can do here. So if I do this, I have a scaling up tone. It is a bass tone. And then when I apply the effect to it, we get to see what it does. And this is where we left off. We left off here. Our amplitude was going up to about this much. And I had the primary effect, because this has a density algorithm built into it. The way this works is it always applies a sign factor. It's the same thing as density. It is a soft saturator. But then this B control here applies also a sign factor, but with the amplitude of 2x, and then dividing the output by 2 as well. And what that does is it acts like a wave folder. When a waveform would go up from 0 all the way to maximum distortion in the sign factor, and some of my stuff clips at that point, but this does not. This does something very different. Lane Bear, I have no idea what you're talking about, so rephrase that and I'll try to answer it. If I can't, I'll continue to say I don't understand. C here is a ×4. If I did a ×3, it would cause the summed waveforms to become a different shape. I've got a ×2, I've got a ×4, and I have a ×6. If we do that, all of these multiplications will end up with the maximum clip factor wrapping around to 0 again. And then the very last thing I did on stream was go from these being full crank, and I'll show you what that does by hitting apply. And you can see that the shape of this, oh, it just went beep. Thank you. You can see that the shape of this, we're getting a weird wavefoldy sound out of it. But you notice it doesn't ramp up continually. And that's because if we zoom in on it, we see it goes louder, and then we start doing these weird things. At full crank, it starts doing this weird stuff. We hit a flat top here. I'm trying mightily to make this work and do something helpful. Oh, look. It is scrolling it nicely. And then this happens. And that's not what I had in mind at all. So the combination of these things means that we have this weird discontinuity added in the middle of the waveform. This is just a sine going into this output. It's supposed to be a sine-like thing or a distortion-like thing, but now we have this funny extra thing going on. And that ends up being super unhelpful. Look, even as it's coming back and doing the wavefolding thing, it does the wavefolding thing, and then adds a weird discontinuity there as well. Whereas if we take D out completely and then add that, we've still got a similar behavior. It's just not quite as extreme. But that's another discontinuity. And then if we take the 4 times out, hey Grens, I don't know if you would call it feeling better, but it is what it is, and we'll see. And I'll probably be more faithful to my tacos today and wind up around exactly 5 or maybe even earlier. Because if I make my tacos and finish up at a reasonable amount of time, I can go and do the weightlifting that I do before going to bed. And I can just sort of call this day a wash, basically, and be like, nope, stopping with this. So let's see, if I undo that, if we have none of these being applied, you can see the shape of this getting louder, and this is pretty much purely a wavefolder. It's doing entirely just a sine and wrapping the sine around. This is what you get when you have simply a sine output. This is what density does if you don't clamp it to the maximum clipping point. Oh, neat. Yeah, I've never actually done weights in the morning or anything like that. Now, one thing we were noticing, which might be interesting, we got a really cool effect when these other ones, see, I've got B and C and D. That's 2x, 4x, and 6x. I had several of them at 0.5. And this is what we're starting with. So basically, if I add the 2x at exactly 0.5, well, it's kind of working, but it's not really what I had in mind. The whole 2x thing, let's run that again, but this time with a massive pad on the back of it. So now it's much quieter. So the idea is to use the 2x FM synthesis. Oh, there was something else I was going to try to remember. Is there a link that I can put in that is Marshall Lohr? Probably not, but my gate might help you. I put out a gate recently. Is there a link that I can put in that is this stream? I do not know. I would like to link to the stream and post it to Blue Sky, because I've had cajillions and billions of people showing up on Blue Sky, and none of them know that I'm streaming right now. That's the sort of thing that one might really do. And I don't know whether I can. I'll find out, I guess. Let's explore. Here's what I'm exploring right now. This is my web page. This is my channel dashboard. I don't think it shows any vital equipment. My channel on YouTube. See, this is me. So this is checking in with Chris from Airwindows. Okay, so I could, in theory, copy that. then post it to my Blue Sky. Telling them I'm doing more coding. And then I can delete that once I'm done. And so now I have posted a link to me. Meanwhile, AOC is saying, oh, sanitation issues are a big one. Your city council person can do a lot. Fair enough. AOC is on the Amtrak asking people for commentary. And now I can go back to here and go back to this and go back to this. So I don't know whether that does any good whatsoever, but there is the possibility people will see it while I am doing this live streaming. And granted, I don't feel I'm at the top of my game today, but maybe I don't have to be. Maybe it's just fine. It will also be interesting to see whether I have giant big mini pants pouring in from Blue Sky and making my life a living hell, which would take a lot of work because I'm not that impressed by giant mini pants. But here's where we're at. So if I put the 2x version back up, here's what it was for. This was the idea. If I add the 2x to the 1x, which is like doing an FM well, it's not really like an FM synthesis, but I'm adding multiple wave shapers, multiple wave folders rather. It does this. Because what I've got is the one that does a simple saturation, and then I've got another which is doing that at twice the rate. So when we get to this flat topped area, what you're seeing is a waveform where the one sine function, that's scaling up to saturate as hard as it can at the top of the waveform. That's where my levels are going to. But the other one's exactly 2x. So that one goes to its maximum here in the middle, and then it dials back to adding nothing at the top. And then as you continue going around, I'm actually puzzled as to why this is not making the waveform asymmetrical, because that could be an interesting additional thing to try. But here's what we've got. And you'll notice that unlike it's really kind of annoying me that the arms of this chair are not letting me swoop in closer, but we'll do what we can. With just the simple, I'll undo it and go again. With just this simple saturation here, this is a sine wave going into a sine function and just cranking up until it wraps around and does this. And you'll notice that it hits its maximum saturation point and then immediately starts flattening out and wavefolding. That is a wavefolding. But when we add the 2x, and that is also wavefolding, so all of these are going to be adding a amplitude that as the amplitude goes up, making it asymmetrical can absolutely cause DC offset, yes. Yes, you can manipulate it until the bulk of the signal is sitting around being in DC offset. I think it's also possible to take silence, a position of 0, and make it massively asymmetrical and have that also be a built-in DC offset. Anywho, here's the thing. If we have the waveform that we see here, and we've now got the 2x added to it, we get this different thing where you remember how it went flat and then immediately started dipping down? This does a different behavior. Adding that 2x, and they're all wavefolders, means that it goes into this rounded section, and then it goes into a flat top section and hangs out there for quite a while before it starts wrapping. And what it sounds like is this. And this is kind of where we were fooling with stuff yesterday. See, the signal is increasing, and you hear the distortion components very slowly being added. And then it gradually starts to wrap. But it's like the same sound the entire time. Now, if we start adding the 4x and the 6x, we get a crazy thing. If we don't do anything about it, because my initial attempt was not scaled right, it almost immediately goes to this square wave looking thing. And then we add this additional bump, so we have this whole complicated middle factor. And if we listened to that, because here's the thing, all of this is made out of wavefolders at increasingly high amplitudes. So what we're getting is a wavefolder where we've told it to add, it's kind of like Paffinetti, it's kind of like my Chevy Chev filter. We are telling it to add these higher and higher harmonics. So one of the things I wanted to experiment with today, and I will experiment with it today, is putting in a stored variable so that I can track slew of this thing and maybe start gating some of these according to how high the slew rate is as a decent approximation of how high the frequency would be. Because you realize if I modulate these controls and clamp them down to 0, I have the original sine wave back again. Although modulating the controls will in itself cause nonlinearities. So I can't really just do a thing where if I have a suddenly high slew rate, I just cut out all of these and then bring them back when it's not, because the mere taking these wave shapers out and putting them back in is going to cause a result. But let's bounce straight over to where I left off. I'll put that to 0.9, and I will hit undo. So we're back to our sine wave. And here's the thing I did last time. Oh, it's cold in UK? Wrap up warm. That's all I got to tell you. So it turned out when I had the 2x, which is B here, it gave me this nice square looking result. And when I had 1 for C and D, which is 4x and 6x, I have not tried continuing to add more overtones. And that's maybe something that I should try. Maybe I should be trying that, but we got to this. And this is a waveform where it is amplifying everything lots Lots and lots and lots. Quiet waveforms are getting boosted by all of these different wave folders being added together. It's manipulating the this final thing that I called divisor is nothing but a gain scaling, and I'm probably going to want to just leave that off. I thought I could make it work by having it add similar factors to this stuff, and I don't think it did. But this doesn't do anything to the sound. This is just applying the output gain. So I don't really need it here at all. But what I got, where we got to at the end of yesterday, and let me see if I sit over here, you can't see me at all. And that doesn't seem good. So time to be struggling and moving around my camera, I guess, and pointing the mic better. That's good enough, I suppose. So here's where we got to. This is what we got at the end of yesterday. The waveform goes up. The sharpness of the corner increases, not right at the top, but like sort of over here. The edges, rather than having it smush off, it's turning into a weird circle. A circle with an extremely straight and flat middle period here. And it's doing a really good job of just going really hard. Like, there's this extremely long section in the middle where all I'm seeing is just it's getting squarer and squarer and squarer, always with keeping the distortion style flat top, but it is making a sloping curve reaching up to that flat top. And then finally, all of these things, including the really high frequency ones, it's probably about, I can't convert it mentally to Celsius. Actually, maybe I can. Probably about 5 C here. It's not really down to 0 C, but it's a little warmer. It's a little warmer than that, but it's still on the chilly side. I've been running my wood stove today. So you see that we have this amplitude that goes up to here, and then it seems to just stop. Even though I don't have a point at which all of these things just straight up clip and stop getting any louder, it's still a continuous curve. And then we finally overdrive it to the point where it very slowly starts adding the wavefold, and it takes forever to do it. But then when it does it, we have this really sharp point on the end of the wavefold, which is another interesting side effect. And then at the very end, we wind up just about producing a double frequency, like a simple wavefolder that's just multiplying the frequency. And it's doing a pretty good job of it, honestly. And this one sounds like this. So hear how the overtone continues to go up in pitch. The harder you hit, the more of a corner it produces. That's what you get. What you get, and this is incredibly, unbelievably, insanely pushed. Like, this is a amount of distortion that staggers the mind. But it's doing it in a way where there is this continuous sharpening of the corner on the distortion, where the harder you hit it, the higher an overtone it produces. And that's probably what's causing the result I'm getting out of it, where it sounds like it is going to full crank but still communicating the texture of the thing. Like you hit it harder and more overtones come out, and this blends with the simple the simplest form of saturation just sounds extremely bassy and washed out and dull. And you have that in density. It's a good sort of tube sound thing, but it's kind of muted and soft. Whereas this one is adding more overtones the harder you push, and that is translating something that is already fully clipped into additional harmonics, which is then adding a kind of dynamicness back to it again. It'll translate degrees of saturation into degrees of overtone. So maybe the next thing to do here is to not care about this stuff, because I'll just pad the output. I can comment that out and then simply use input sample times output gain. I don't know how many letters I have in here. Let's find out. Z. So I can make the literal last one be my output gain. Yeah, it did sound really good on drums. I'm wondering how far I can take this. And there's a simple thing to do, which is literally to try it. After all, look at this. This stuff doesn't matter. I could recode it anytime I want. It did not actually end up with something that tracked stuff appropriately. But this is another story. Because this, I can just continue to do this pattern. So we got second stage needs to be 1. It's at full crank. But then the rest of these are half. That is the same as this just being this. And if it's times 4 times 0.5, that's of course the same thing as times 2. And if it's times 6 times 0.5, that's the same thing as times 3. So what if we continue this pattern? And again, this doesn't change. If we have this, this is what we had before, you see. It's an interesting little discontinuity there. But my question is, what happens if we just keep doing it and doing it and doing it? Times 3, times 4, times 5, times 6, times 7, and so on. What do we get then? Because like that literally changed. Setting this to 0.5 literally scaled this. What that also means is this. These two are the same. I'm just adding different amounts of it. And that's interesting. Unknown, I don't know yet. This is all new to me. Basically, I'm trying to just shake off the alarm about current events that I mentioned at the beginning of the stream, and do some work before tacos and exercise and bedtime. And I'm grappling with the fact that I have this dumb new chair, which is a delightful new chair, but I'm definitely disappointed with the new chair creaking more than the old one did. And I have mixed feelings about having arms on this chair. After all, I bought one that wasn't supposed to have those. They sent me one that did have arms by mistake and didn't charge me for them. But I decided not to have arms for a reason, because I play guitar, and because I'm not used to having the arms get in my way when I want to roll. Like, my studio is like this right here. just drag this over here, and then we are going to do a whole thing. That's not the thing I had in mind, but boop. So here's me with a camera that I can try to use for this stuff. Also, if we get bored with coding, I do have a other thing that I can play with, although you can't see it very well on this camera, I've got to say. That Plinky that I got. And that is a delightful little thing. I could start playing with that if we get bored of experimenting with code. But you can see that, well, you can't really see it very well. I have arms on this chair, and I never intended to. Also, I have a light on this camera even. So now you can really see that I have arms in this chair. But I wasn't supposed to. That was a mistake. Enough with that. You go sit over there. Boop. Back we go. I would not mind. Yeah, it can be irritating with the arms like here. I remember one of the things I wanted to mention. Boop. And let's see. So you can see that here is my studio and the laptop I'm developing on, and my little video control thingy, which is a Blackmagic A10 Mini Pro. And I have a studio desk from Argosy. I've had that for many, many, many years. It was a really big investment once. One of the neat things about it is that if anybody bashed in my windows and tried to steal all of my stuff, they'd never be able to take that because it's too big and heavy. But you'll notice that I have my arm on this armrest. Then, if I try to slide in, oh look, it's the arm of the chair bonking into this, so I can't slide it up to where I can be seen on the camera anymore properly, which is usually what happens is I scooch right up to the edge of it. So dumb challenges of dumb Chris trying to do what I can with this stuff. Oh yeah. No, Andy, I have mentioned before how the Fender Rhodes is the kind of thing where nobody wants one because it's like having a real piano. It's too heavy and it's too much of a pain in the butt. One of my goals for doing all of the stuff that I do is I would like to eventually get to a point where I could download like literally everything that I do and readjust my head into sort of a burial. If you know the dubstep producer Burial. More of a burial-like zone where rather than I have to play a guitar because I'm a guitar player, be able to make music the way that I want to using only downloadable stuff. And that's why I have the there is that Analog Me 75 website, which contains all of the recordings from all of my recordings I could get a hold of and none of the project files. So basically, if you liked any of the drum fills in like Rise or something like that, well, hey, you can actually go and download those and sample them. But it won't necessarily be easy because it won't necessarily be lined up with the two room mics and the kick mic or whatever it is that I've got. You'd have to kind of make it up. Alex, no, not really, but my next door neighbors did get burglarized once a couple of years ago. Their response to that happening was they went and bought a giant Mastiff Hound who threatened all of the neighbors and scared me occasionally, but it wasn't ever quite loose. And those aren't terribly long-lived, so I'm not sure if it's still there. However, if you ask me about it, oh yeah, no, it's still there. They're quite safe. But yeah, that same neighbor is the guy who had this chair delivered to his house and put it on a little hand truck. And he's an old guy, but, well, that's mean to say. I'm an old guy. He put it on a little hand truck and rolled it over and knocked on my door and delivered it to me himself because the idiot FedEx people sent the box to the wrong place. Anyways, where I had left off, I had this grand notion of let's figure out how this works and then find out what we can do with it. Because I had tried something which was literally this, and it produced a very interesting result, which was that I set those things to the third stage and fourth stage and so on, two particular things. I guess if this doesn't work, I can start exploring with this again. And if I can identify a pattern, maybe I can make this continue. So let's find out. That's a lot of sine functions, so this is going to be expensive, but every one of these has to be separate because much like with the Chebyshev filter, each one of these has its own place. I want to see what this sequence does. I know if I go 2, 2, and 3, it gives me a nice, neat thing. But what does this do? And then these go in even numbers. So 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22. So I don't know what this is going to do, but I'm following a sequence that might work for me, or it might just be a complete sidetrack. I don't know. Time to find out. Time to see what this does. Because like the first couple of instances gave me a useful result. Again, this is doing this whole thing. Oh, I have to update this. That's some kind of truck outside. I don't know what that is about. And then here is my sine wave. Let's see what it does. We don't even have any controls to change, although I do have to set Z to full crank because it is my, well, maybe I do. Let's see what we get. Interesting. Okay. Well, one thing we just found out is that doing this sequence, it gets louder and then it slowly levels off. Although we have a lot of gain going into it. I will. Let's do just that. Let's see what we see. So one of the first things that happens is our amplitude increases. This is still looking very smooth. And it increases. Oh, yay, I've got jackhammers outside. Thank goodness I'm not trying to do a mix or a recording. Yeah, that is the noise that just started happening is street construction. They're working on some kind of water main or something. So what I see here is we are clinging to this round shape very hard. And we still have most of our corner not at the top point, but a little off, so it makes it become this sort of roundy shape. Let's see what happens when we keep going. Wow, okay. So with that many factors, it is fighting like crazy to turn the saturation point into a perfect circle. That is actually a waveform that will cut down on high harmonics, but we have a lot of harmonics being created by this extremely it's turning into a square wave with circle tops. Oh, what time is it here? It's 3:22 in the afternoon here. What do we got? And then again, as we continue to add all of these, the first thing that happens is we're steepening the center part of it more and more and more, the more of these are present. Maybe what I should be doing is making a sort of counter where it'll run a little for loop for as many times as I want, and it'll just continue adding levels to this, because it seems like I can go to very large numbers of levels and it'll just keep intensifying this result. And then here we have our steepest area. We still have a softened corner, and then we're starting to get the wrap. And then as we keep going, it's taking a very long time to get into its wavefolding. But one thing I can predict is that the wavefolding is going to go really sharp and pointy as it comes around. Like what we're starting to see what looks almost like a square wave. The middle part of this wave is really steep compared with what we started with. That also means amplification. This is like a reshaping of the wave that is extremely high saturation. It's going to make it sound really, really loud. And then it rounds off and hits this, which acts like a corner. It makes me wonder whether if I just added an infinite succession, Mel, hey, long time. If I added an infinite succession of this, it would increase this behavior and then wrap around to a sharp point. That it would start as a flat top, and then this would develop into a point. Let's see what it does now. And there we go. We have this corner point up here, and then it's smoothing out again and making the sharpest point it can as it starts to really wavefold. And by the time we get to the end state, this is basically what we had the first time. We're softening as we go to insanely wavefolded behavior. It is not making sharp corners in anything. Instead, as we push it that far, we're getting a sort of pitch doubling effect, but it's going to refuse to make sharp corners. Like, look at the tops of these, and then we scroll back to here, and look at this as it reaches the center point. That's a much sharper corner than it gets when we finally push it through to being full crank. And if we listen to this, it sounds like this. And that overtone keeps subtly getting sharper and harder. The more you push into it, the higher that grind goes. To the point where it sounds quite crunchy, edgy. And here's the sharpest. Sounds like the guy from Nonlinear Circuits building some of his stuff, honestly. There's this Eurorack sound to it. Oh, I have made it wavefold a lot. Want to see it wavefold even more? I can increase the gain. So this is an interesting result, and I do have a idea as to, because the interesting thing about that, however, is we are now applying like 12 sine functions per sample. we're going really hardcore with this, where we're generating all of these sine functions just because I wanted to follow this pattern and see what it did. And you know, here's something I could do. Because I am satisfied with where I'm getting regarding following that pattern. That pattern is doing what I wanted. Like, one possible question is whether there's any way to optimize it. It might be fine. This could end up being a weird plugin where in simple forms, it's almost as simple as density. It's like just one or two sine functions, and then the harder you push, the sillier it'll get. So one thing I could do is this. And let's cast it to an int just to be sure. So I do not know whether I've got some ideas here. And one of them is going to involve tracking slews. And I'm probably going to want to make some adjustments. But all this, because remember, all this that I keep adding, all of this, the more of these I add, the more gain I'm putting into the very quiet sections of the sound. In fact, I can demonstrate that pretty easily. By firing this up. Yeah, people are working outside, something fierce. I should put up a mic. We'll sample them. You can put them in your music. I don't think that's going to work, but it would be quite funny. It's one way of getting percussive sounds is record road work. Anywho. Here is Hypersoft. Z is the output. Nothing else actually works. It is just gain and output. And if we use this one to distort, and I have miscalculated somehow. What's gone wrong? Oh, do we not actually change that? We did not actually change that. So here's the one that I most recently changed. That's a pretty aggressive loudinator, that is. Goes from this to this. Pretty exactly to this. Oh, interesting. Wait, that's not the most recent one, is it? That is so much not the most recent one that I might not have good data. Give me a second. I don't think we saw this. I don't think we saw this one. I think we just saw the previous one because I forgot some important steps. So let's, this is fine. Not a problem there. Let's make it C. And now this time, we're not using that for anything. We're applying the gain trims. We are adding all of this. And this can be in a for loop. I have no idea, Alex, what RMS level is, but this is the part that I forgot to do because I'm rattled and confused by current events and stuff. And I'm going to try to catch up and do all the things I need to do today, but I forgot to do this. So we don't actually know yet what that sine ramping thing is going to do. I did all this, but then I didn't see what it did. So let's now go and see what it did. Clearly I'm missing out. Clearly I failed to do this part. I do know that having it with the first three is going to be fine. But what I don't know is whether this is going to give me anything remotely interesting. But there is one way to find out. So C is the output level. B does absolutely nothing. A is the input gain, which is 12 dB plus, we're boosting up by 12 dB. And let's see what happens. We have not seen this yet. Okay. That is actually a problem. We're doing something, but we're supposed to be seeing a continuous curve here. So what happened? Because I know I can get that continuous curve back. Oh God. Well, there's your problem. It is immediately going to like a square wave and then staying there as this sharp corner is sitting here, and then this develops out of it. So yeah, we clearly, this is not how that was supposed to go. So the reason that is being done is, oh, I'm not going to play that. And I'm not running DI through the stream anyhow, so this is what happens when you take this many stages that start out as a positive and then wrap around because they are all wave folding separately. So what we've got is the factors being involved when you have the times 12, like the times 10. Hey, Florian. When you have the times 10 at too high of a volume, these high order ones at too high of a volume, they're adding too much to the central thing, and then they're wrapping, they're turning around and going back down again. And the lower order ones are still adding a positive factor, but our scaling is off. So all the high order ones, like times 11, times 12, times 10, etc., those are all wrong. And up to this point, these were fine. So maybe it's time to look for a different relation between this multiply and this divide. Because basically what we've got is we've got a multiply, we've got a divide. The multiply keeps going up, meaning that smaller and smaller spaces towards that middle zero section are going to go to full crank. It's just a continuous series of these going. And when we had these ones, it was fine. But I do not actually know whether times 3 divided by 6 is the correct ratio. Again, I will point out, we got this. This is literally the opposite of what I'm trying to do. I like the fact that the amplitude gets really, really high, but there's a problem in that it's bumping up too soon and then cutting off. Like, these are supposed to be able to add together into a continuous waveform that in theory will produce the, like we saw what we had before, but what we have now is this. You boost incredibly hard into this maximum volume section, right? But it's all being combined in such a way that, sure, we get to have an incredible amount of amplitude added relative to the original, which was this. Like, we started with this slope, and then we got to almost perfectly vertical. That's a lot of gain being added. But then it goes crazy and does this weird stuff. So let's delete this, and let's look at maybe because the farther we go with this, the less significance each of these additional factors will have. Like, if I instead do a thing where it's the square, like 2 times 2 is 4, right? And we've got 2 times 2 equals 4. We've also got this other stage where it's times 2 and then divided by 2. I don't know what happens if we delete that. It's not how we started. But what we've got after we do that, and we might just want to put that back, honestly. I feel like maybe I might just want to put that back. If instead we're doing the square of this as it increases, we get very different results. We get a 16th. We get a 25th. $36. When I went to school, they made you memorize this stuff, although I'm probably going to give up. Like, I know 9 times 9 is 81, but I don't remember all the rest of the ones, and so I can just figure it out. 49, I knew that. I bet it's 56. No, 64. Silly me. One and an 8, but in opposite sequence. So if this is what we end up doing, then we are adding ridiculously small amounts of these higher sections. And I want to see what we get. And I've also removed the very first one where it's input sample times 2 and then divided by 2. Ooh. Although, what would we get? Okay, so time to continue experimenting wildly. What if that is the sequence? So 1, oh no, wait, no, that's not it at all, is it? tell you because it doesn't go that way, does it? Sine input sample times 1 divided by 1 times 1 is the same as sine input sample, so that part's actually fine. Let's see what we got. I want to see if this sequence does anything useful. And I have to remember to copy it over to the components folder. If I do that, then we actually get to look at the thing that we created. And it's time to see what that does. Remembering, of course, that I removed one of the times 2. And remembering, of course, to normalize it and fade it and all of that stuff so that we can see what it does. So this is now 12 dB boost, and then the entire stack, but it falls off way faster. And then the output gain is just unity gain. Well, clearly the output gain doesn't have to be unity gain, but that's an interesting shape. What have we got here? We will look at it, and if that does any good, I will listen to it. So as the sine increases, Grens, I just want to see what it does. Because, you know, one of the things that happened when we were experimenting with this yesterday, which I can go back to anytime I want, is a thing where it would mushroom upwards into like a square wave with carefully rounded off corners. And then it would become a like square wave with circles on top and bottom of it. And then as you kept pushing, you would have the corners of that square wave gradually become sharper. And I want to see whether there's a sequence of operations that will get me that kind of thing. Remembering, of course, that I left one of these out. So let's see. We are getting a sharper and sharper center sound, and then a rounded off section to a pointed top. That's interesting. That might not be what I have in mind, but it would at least be an interesting side effect, wouldn't it? Again, center looks sharper and sharper. We're not getting the squared off top yet. I should run this over again and pad it a little bit, because we're getting to where we can't see what the waveform is doing. Undo. And cut it down to, let's cut it down to 0.75. That was something that worked previously. Apply. Yep. That has not actually... So what do we got here? A round sine wave top at very, very, very quiet settings. Notice what this is doing. This is now causing a pointy effect on the top of the wave. That's interesting and kind of weird. I'm not sure what to make of that. Maybe I need to put the other factor back, because this is not really what I had in mind. And see, now it is rounding off. So we don't actually have a flat topping zone here. I'm increasingly thinking that the 2x sign probably needs to be there. I don't know if I need to add it twice though. And then over we go. It kind of is slowly having an effect. It's not kicking in as fast. Oh, and look at how sharp that becomes. It rounds off again though. So now the points of our wave folded wave are pointier. But as we hit this point in the middle, and it moves the quickest, it forms the sharpest of corners, which is probably not what we want. So that's interesting. May or may not be useful. We can hear it too. If you did this, it would sound like this. See, that's already too many harmonics, I think. It doesn't have a round enough saturation. It sounds like it's always adding a buzzing effect. And that buzzing effect doesn't change, does it? We can't have that. It's like a kazoo. You immediately get this grind, and the grind kind of stays, and that's not what we want. Because if we were going to have an overtone like that, the last thing we want is to have that uniformly added to all things at all volume levels. Yeah, it sounds like a guitar amp buzz. So this clearly not going to work, but I'm not out of ideas yet. Or if I am, I'm not going to admit it. So how about this? Do that. And then these have to, we skip this one. Maybe we leave this one. Yeah, the one before was way smoother. We stopped having the smoothness. You know, when we had the one that was smoothness, it was like this, except for it was divided by 6 here. And we got to where it seemed as if that wasn't what was going to be happening. We're about 10 minutes out from me defrosting my taco stuff, by the way. I'm basically happy with this day of work. I would like to be able to put out this plugin this weekend, but you know, there's other stuff that I could put out if I don't. And I'm very interested in what I can make this do, especially since these are so small. If I can get this to behave at all, I'd like to see what it does. Like adding more of this times 2 divided by 2 here. That's going to cause it to become more of the square wave I was working with previously. So let's try this. Let's try it literally as this. Because you realize what I'm doing is literally a bunch of stages of wavefolding, all of which are being added to the input sample, all of which are wavefolding all the way around it in negative and then back again. And if I can trigger them based on what slew is happening, I can make these cut themselves out if they would cause aliasing. And that's an interesting prospect, because the more multiplication I have going on in here with the wavefolding, the more it's going to cause aliasing. Yeah, well, and bear in mind, this isn't technically the overtone series. This is something completely else. Like, it's a little mysterious. I'm not exactly sure what we're doing here. But those are the funnest ones. Those are always the funnest times. And if I can get a striking enough result, I'll play audio through it rather than just the sines. We can also play the high sine through it and see whether the aliasing does anything really nasty. That might be interesting. Probably have to do that after adding in the for loop that it would need to have. Because here's what we're doing. We now have all of these being applied no matter what. So let's apply this and see whether the amplitude. Oh, I have to scale it down again. Look at that. Undo. Well, that's interesting. I wonder what that did. I bet this is enough, though. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Oh. Guess what's obviously the next thing to try? Golden ratio. There's no special reason that that would be the thing I care about. Let's see whether it goes exactly to 0 if I apply exactly that. No. But that gives me enough room to see what we have done. Here we have the sine wave that we can already see is starting to become squared. The middle of that is not what you'd get on a regular sine wave. It's supposed to be curvier like this. We're immediately getting to a point where we have this very steep center, and then it's trying to do those it's trying to round off the top. So let's see what happens when we scroll beyond. We have a steeper and steeper center. And then we have a gradually pointier top, but it's not producing that circular behavior. It's just making that steeper edge. This is going to have a bunch of partials. This is going to have pointy-edged partials. Although one thing about it is this is going to make stuff loud, to the point where it's probably worth having a listen to what it sounds like on audio or on drums or whatever. And then the more we push it, it just gradually starts to square off. So that is, in fact, what we got. We got something where it makes points on the top rather than a flat top. This does the opposite of a flat top. Then we go beyond to over to here, and we get to this point where we are starting to get the wavefolding effect. And let's see what happens then. And again, it takes a really long time to increase that wavefolding effect on the top. It's really resisting bending down into here, but then it's going to start doing it very suddenly, like this. Here is our sharpest corner as it reaches this point. That's it's like a heart. Look at that. I bet if I added even more partials, it would sharpen this little point even better. I just don't have enough of them. And then it starts turning that point into a roundy circle behavior. And we gradually turn into sort of a sharpened asymmetrical circles and points, with this middle part being very hyped and boosted. Like, remember what the basic waveform looked like. What we have here is a extremely aggressive detail and treble hype coming from how many of these partials we've added. And we can go way back to here and see that we still have a very similar thing. Like, look at that. We've got a flat top looking result at maximum clip, but the number of these we've added is so steep that although the rest of it forms this relatively normal softened square wave-like thing, the central bit, man, that's sharp. Like, I've added too many partials. But there's no such thing as too many partials if it sounds cool. However, one thing I will tell you is that this is going to make it sound like there is a buzz combined with this. Let's see what happens when we scooch over to here. This is going to produce a buzz. This is supposed to be a smooth transition between this, but it's not, is it? So my question is this simply a factor of having all of those partials in there? Like as if I'm supposed to be scaling it back by something other than the power of the thing that I added? I don't know how to do that, Lucasipo, but if you have any ideas, like experiment with them, see if you can make that happen. So this is going to cause a nasty buzz at all volume levels, which is one of the things we're trying to avoid. See, even in here, it's this nice rounded sort of not actually distorted thing, but we're still looking at a thing where we have these funny corners. See, it's rounded, then it does a sharper swerve, and then it's rounded again. And if we listen to this, it sounds like this. See, it's already a buzz. It starts out as a buzz. And then it's the same buzz no matter what. Isn't that an interesting transition? But that's not what we wanted. So here's the question. We needed to have this, but do we need this? Or is this part of what's throwing it off? I think I tried it with this one commented out, and it was not satisfactory. And bearing in mind, of course, that another thing we can do is just not use as many of these. We don't have to have this many sign calculations in the middle of all this. In fact, that is going to make it a very CPU heavy plugin to run. So I'm actively interested in not having as much of that or figuring something else out about it. So I've commented out the extra 2x. I always forget to normalize and ramp it. And back we go, and let's see what we get now. I'm not sure about this. It's ramping up very quickly right at the beginning there. However, it's starting to be what I want to see. But I think I see the same problem reasserting itself. See? See, the middle bit is a steeper part, that there's this discontinuity there. I've like dialed that center bit back, but it's not good enough. Although at this stage it's making a nice round shape. That's almost a perfect circle. It just can't. It's making this transition, which I don't like. And we have yet to listen to audio through this. Yeah, turns out that was not the exact amount for having it clip, but it was worth a shot, and it's showing me the entire thing on the waveform, so that's cool. So here's what we've got. We've got all these really high partials that will produce lots of aliasing. And they are causing this central bit. Because what's happening is the more of those we have, I can even add more. Let's add some more just for the hell of it. Because I want to see what it does with this. This may or may not be correct. And then we just continue the series. and then continue the division. This is causing the amount of effect that these have to continue to scale down to microscopic sizes. But what it's going to do is clarify these discontinuities. It's expanding outwards the discontinuities to unreasonable amounts. So 13 becomes 169. Nice. 14 becomes 196. Another possibility is, what if it was that cubed? We would be reducing the amount of effect this stuff has by more and more by using different factors for calculating it. This becomes 225. I am... Oh, well, that's useless. I'm going to scooch away and defrost my food because I'm in the middle of doing this, but it is exactly 4:01. Won't take me a moment. Be right back. The amazing thing about this is those guys were jackhammering in the rain. Why was that? What are they doing? Anyways, back in a minute. Okay. I'm back. Well, Lean Bear, the thing is, I am interested in finding out whether there is some pattern to the numbers or something that you can do. Like, if it turns out that the divisor for this is like cubed version of it, or that I need to pick only even or only odd numbers of that, then that's another thing entirely. But extrapolating on these is causing the sign to get wrapped and wavefolded into interesting shapes with behaviors that I can try to seek out and maximize. In particular, what I'd like to do is have these sequences produce a square wavy-like thing where it sharpens the curve without actually having it increasingly sharpen up to a flat top. I want it to have the sharpest point of the curve a little ways off, which is why the roundness factor that's coming is useful. And then when you wavefold it, it probably needs to converge into a, where the wavefolding wraps back down again, the flat top curves over. that probably needs to converge to a sharp point exactly when it hits 0. I think that's possible, but some of the behaviors I'm seeing from this, 16 times 16, that's 256. I could have guessed that. And 289. So the thing is, like, if I work this out so that I can get this sequence exactly right, which might include leaving that one that's currently commented out, and I make it so that using all of these harmonics, and they're a weird batch of harmonics too. They're like just being made out of wavefolding. I'm not really sure quite how this works, but maybe nobody's tried this before because it's too dumb of an idea. And those are wonderful when you try something that is too dumb of the idea and then something really cool happens. Then you get to use that and go, hey, it wasn't as dumb as all that. So let's see, build. Again, I might need to put this commented out one back in. I could see that being a useful part of the sequence, but it's only going to affect large-scale shaping of the wave. I'm currently leaving out, which is going to produce the series that I've generated. It seems like not lots of people came running over from Blue Sky, but that's fine. It would save me effort if that didn't turn out to be a thing. I wouldn't have to bother with posting it. I was curious whether that was going to cause people to be interested and come and see what I was doing, but that's not necessarily the case. And apply. Boom. And it's chugging. We're doing too many sine functions per sample here. That chugged. I'm not sure it'll even run in real time, but it might. I do like the smoothness of this arc, the sort of amplitude of it. Asine, undo sine, right, but this would not be able to. Lean Bear, I think you misheard. People are leaving Twitter in droves. Blue Sky has expanded to the point where it is more populous than Threads, very suddenly. So here we are. Here's our amplitude coming up. I think I still see the sharper point at the center, but I might be able to fix that. And I most definitely still see the pointiest part is up at the top. But granted those things, like granted, we still have this bit in the middle because I have too many factors up here. And it's probably worth experimenting with cubing that factor rather than simply having it be squared. My divisor is squared, but if the divisor was cubed, maybe I wouldn't be seeing this. This is a unpleasant, I guarantee that this is an unpleasant artifact that nobody would like. From my work with, like, from my work with a old plugin, the new channel that I put out, which had a sine-based curve, but then also cut it in at a particular point. So there was a sharp transition just like this, starting at the middle part, and then it would sharply break into the sine-based curve. People hated the sound of that one. It was shocking how poorly that went. And then here we have the flatness developing. This part's still fine. This is still mostly what I want. It's just that you see there's a lump on this curve here. There's the straighter part in the middle, which is having too many of these factors. And then where it curves over, I'm looking for a particular shape being produced here, and I'm looking for this exact behavior. So this part's all cool. As we are ramping into it farther and farther, it like seemingly doesn't react. And then what we're going to see is it's going to continue to become steeper, and then it will suddenly swoop down and cross 0 and start to widen again. But at the point that it hits 0, it's going to make the sharpest corner it can. And away it goes. So this is the point where we have a corner produced by all of these factors. And it's supposed to be, if I did an infinite number of these in series, it would be producing this going to a really sharp, accurate little point. I do not know if adding more of these would deal with this discontinuity point here. Because again, look at that. Guarantee that's going to sound like butt. It's not going to sound good. Nobody will like it. It is basically class B distortion. These have to go smoothly between each other, and they don't. They super don't. So this does not succeed, but it's showing us some interesting things. And again, also for the reason that we have that discontinuity there, it also shows itself here. You can see that those are not perfectly straight lines. And certainly if you kind of continue onwards, they quickly stop being perfectly straight lines and become another weird point. And again, as it crosses the center, because of these really small, no, it does not. This is because I have so many high harmonics here. Each of these are going to try to produce a harmonic that I might be able to mute if the frequency is too high. I might be able to use that in order to make it stop aliasing. But these high harmonics here are what's causing that problem. So that's probably enough for me to fool around with. We can also listen to it, by the way. I can let you listen to it. It's just not going to sound nice. Select, move to start, hit play. What you're going to hear is it'll start sounding like it is going into a distortion, but there will be this high-pitched whine. There will be this grind to it that is not appealing right away. And that doesn't actually change in tonality. I've added so many of the higher harmonics that it's kind of quieter now than it was. But this just goes to show me that this is not the right sequence. So one thing I would like to try immediately, and that is include the sine input sample times 2 twice. Or indeed, what I'll end up doing is including this, and then we'll try the cube. But I want to see what it does with this. I want to see how this affects what I've already made. Depends upon what you mean by simpler one. Because we've kind of scrambled the... You must understand, one of the things I'm demonstrating with this, with 3, is I don't have as many of these high harmonics, but this sequence will show me what the correct algorithm is for the simpler one. If I can get this to do exactly what I want with however many harmonics I want, and it does its job and does it correctly, that will also show me the I can just remove all the other ones, and then the simpler one will do all the things that the simpler one does, but even more finely balanced. It will just have less sharpness on tap. I'm doing this work with lots and lots of extra harmonics because it's going to show me what that sequence is doing. So right now we're going to have a look at what it looks like when I have the second harmonic, and then the second harmonic is also included in the sequence. And if we don't get to a delightful end to today, I'll come back next week or something, and we'll keep going. Because I've got reverbs and things I could give you guys. I have cans. I did cans. That's a reverb that's designed to make mixing on headphones sound easier. I haven't had time to test it or anything. There's plenty of stuff I can give you. Let's see. Fade in. Back to our little friend. Say hello to my little friend. And look at how slowly that jugs. Man, I've got a lot of sine functions per sample. That is a messy boy. But let's see what starts happening. Okay, you know, an interesting thing I am seeing. Oh, no, it's still there. I was like, look at what I'm seeing. Oh, no, look at that. That's exactly the thing I was complaining about before. However, I'm liking the way this round rect is showing up. I don't like this part. I don't like the fact that we've got this tiny little square part. The more harmonics I add, the smaller that's going to be. Oh, would you like Stonefire Comp? Lean Bear, let me know if you would like Stonefire Comp. I could absolutely do that. That's what it's for. It's letting you play with some of this stuff. So what I'm finding here is the more of these harmonics I add, the more you focus in on this little hype zone, which is seemingly always there and is a discontinuity, which is not the same as the discontinuity plugin. This is a discontinuity in this curve, which is going to make it have a nasty buzzing noise. The more of these I add with this series, the more it is going to sharpen this point and make it quieter. But the amplitude of it seems to be consistent. Like there's always going to be that little flat place at this sequence of, and that's why I'm wondering whether I need to go for the cubed rather than the squared divide. Because like if there's too much of this, because the small variations are having too much of an effect, but it's producing, as a rule, this interesting round square thing, then I can just dial back the contribution of the higher harmonics and have it ending up being what we see here. It starts to turn into a thing where we have circle sections joining into each other. The circle sections join into a vertical part here and a horizontal part here. And for quite a ways, it just sticks with that. And this is your maximum volume. Is sharpening this curve, but you notice that this curve still looks like a circle, and that's the behavior I was looking to get. And it's not going to be the sample waveform being slightly wonky. That is a digitally generated sine. I do trust Twisted Wave to be able to generate a sine. So some of this is still very much what I'm looking for. I just don't trust that the sequence is correct. Like, see what it's doing? We're going like forever, and it's only barely. What I'm thinking is, as this increases, it goes to this maximum part. It clips, but it doesn't soft clip. Instead, it sort of tries to generate a circle section to bridge these two things. In so doing, it's making it louder and louder, but we're not getting higher harmonics. And then this part starts lowering. And I think what it should be doing is lowering to the point where it forms a sharp point either here or a sharp point at the opposite extreme. Like maybe it's not supposed to go down to a sharp point as it hits the center, which is what this is trying to do. What we have here is a mighty sharp section here, and then as it reaches that center point, it's doing its level best to make a sharp point. But maybe what the correct behavior would be is have it go all the way over to here, where it's basically just turned into a complete wavefold at this stage. But rather than this be a really smooth result, I can't really see it terribly well. I'm trying to make it sit still while I scroll. There we go. Got there. So what I'm talking about is we have this very slow progression as we distort more. And one of the things that's happening is our curves are becoming sharper, which is going to cause the sine to produce higher and higher harmonics, but very gradually. And then as we get here, as it starts to wrap, as it starts to wavefold, we've currently got it coming to a point as it reaches this, but what if it needs to come to a point as it hits the maximum reverse pole, right? As it goes all the way through and goes to the opposite extreme, maybe that's where it's supposed to be hitting a point. And when would that be happening? Well, it might be happening if each of these high harmonics has less of a contribution, which making the high harmonics have less of a contribution is also what is going to stop this. This is strictly a discontinuity in this curve, because the higher the harmonic, the more it gets to kind of be enhanced. Like the more of these I add, the sharper this distinction will be, and it kicks in almost immediately. So what that means is we've got to adjust, and I will let you hear this, by the way. Let's listen to it. See, there's a buzz immediately. But we do hear the edge sharpening. That little harmonic that's creeping up. And there we go. And it starts to wrap. And it gets sharper and sharper. And then we'll get a buzz very suddenly. And suddenly into wavefolding. So that's interesting. Pushing it that hard, making it that intensely distorted, and then getting that result out of it. And again, I think it's because my calculations for this stuff are not correct. So we're going to go for cubes rather than squares. And I can do the first one already. This one is exactly the same because that's part of my most basic shape. But then we start adding these, starting with the same one again, and continuing as we go. Because that's how we got on the track of this interesting shape that's being created out of weird harmonics of like wrapping stuff. 4 times 2 is 8. Then immediately we got a 27. and a 64, and these are going to fall off way, 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 way faster. But that might be just what we need, because the smaller these harmonics get, the more minuscule they need to become. I'm real interested to know whether, with this many harmonics on it, I'm going to hear a buzz at all, or be able to perceive one. Because, like, theoretically, maybe I can make it so you don't even hear that buzz, and the whole thing might behave differently. This is 125. I actually knew the answer to that one. $216. $343. See, these harmonics are getting much smaller at a rapid rate. This is going to be 512. It's going to be one of those binary associated ones. So will R16, by the way. It'll be a very large binary associated one. $729. These are getting much smaller at a staggering rate. And I can make a for loop that does all of these. Not sure if this is really increasing the stakes so much as I can identify that there is that discontinuity that is being caused by the higher harmonics. I'm certain of that. So we're just making them scale back more aggressively. Oh, I know what this is. 100 times 10 is not difficult to figure out. We'll get there. 144 becomes 728. That also means we'll be able to get results without running quite as many of these, because having this many is quite costly, and you probably don't need them. The thing about it, though, is that if I use a slew rate to also calculate whether to apply these based on how fast the slew is, that could also produce a aliasing suppression effect. And I like the sound of that. Could be cool. Could be cool. We'll find out. Two, 197. They have very small contribution to everything, but they will matter. Any of these might be left off if input sample times 18 or the sine of it would end up producing a aliased frequency. And we can also run it on a higher pitched sine, see what it does. Oops. Okay, where was I at? 196. I hit the memory button on the calculator by mistake. Times 14. One thing about it, we are making them have much and much less of a factor. It's quite a difference between like an order of magnitude amount of influence, and it's all part of the series. So if the series works, then we can use smaller parts of the series and it should still be correct, just less detailed. 225 times 15. This is the 4096. which is a shifting of bits operation. I mean, I could keep going as long as I want, but I think this number is enough to really start showing me stuff. And it's also enough that I can use that 100 Hertz tone and nothing is actually aliasing yet. So 324 times 18. 5, 8, 3, 2. I could increase it out to 20, but I don't think I need to. I think this is just fine. This will be just fine the way it is. But it's an interesting series. This is going to produce a different result. I just don't know how different. It'll be a bit of a pain if I have to walk it right back again. But you never know until you try. This is the thing that I need to try so that I can know. I can leave off all these high harmonics just fine, but I know what will happen is the discontinuities will go away. And I'm kind of down with having those discontinuities stay there so I can see what they do. And that's... Observe the shape this has produced. We see that the very beginning of it no longer has that little nub where it ramps up very suddenly. Let's see what we have wrought. Excuse me, kind of tired. We are becoming much, much louder. I don't know if that discontinuity is still there. I tell you what, I'll find out soon enough. And we go into where we are now wrapping. Okay. And then what happens as we continue? Is that still a sharp point? Is this a sharp point? No, that's a very roundy looking thing. And we most certainly do not have a sharp point as it hits the center part. We do distort up to a nice straight line, and also I tell you what, I no longer see a aggressive discontinuity right there. There's just the faintest hint of one, which I'm not sure that's a problem. Let's see what happens when we extend even further, but not so far that I can't see where the actual wave was. So this would be the most aggressive point. That looks pretty smooth. That looks pretty smooth. Maybe this is one that's going to work. Let's listen to it, and then let's listen to it on audio. See, already, that buzz is not there this time. We do have a funny sort of character going on as a result of all these harmonics getting involved. But, yep. Well, I'm thinking, yeah, I'll play this, but then I can run it, I can like run drums and stuff into it and see what that does. Because of course we're interested in hearing that. That was the highlight from yesterday, is playing drums. So we've got overtones. And the sharpness is building. I'm looking to have it make, hear that? slight mid-rangey growl, and then it needs to go there. It's basically morphing into a square wave very slowly. You want to give it a try? Yeah, you can see my source code, man. Soon enough, the source code will be on airwindows.com and you can play with it as much as you like. But I think this is starting to point to something useful. Let's listen to it all the way through to the end. In particular, let's hear what it does when that wave crosses 0. We do not seem to be able to do this in such a way that it shows properly, so we'll not bother. It's as good as we're going to get. Harmonics continue. What does it do when it crosses? I like it. I like it. That's kind of what I thought. And I can. Give me a second. What I'll do is undo, and then what I will do is make an effect stack so we can see what that is doing as we were doing yesterday to the series of harmonics. Absolutely, I will run it through span. And it goes like this. So interesting. We have a very complex waveform here, but it's being very well controlled. However, I will say a bunch of these are gonna alias. I will show you that almost immediately. It's the next thing I try. But it's making stuff into a sort of funny triangle, and the rate of fall off is accelerating as it goes. I bet it will continue sneaking in this direction. Oh, we've got a waveform dropping out here. And we've got the fundamental dropping out. So it builds up like that. Basically what we're getting, oh, it vanished. What we're getting, rather than just one harmonic, is this really smooth series of harmonics. But this is not what you get when you're doing like ramping into a square wave. It's resisting that somehow. And one of the things I was going to show you we can do this. I'm probably going to want to turn down my speakers for this one. Woof. A few. Streaming makes it harder. I can't do as many while streaming. I've got about 20 minutes left for today. Oh, did I not tell it to... I told it to do the sample. Give me a second. I didn't have a selection. What I have to do is tell it to be this, but over a duration. Beep. Here we have this. That's deeply annoying. Actually, to tell you what, that's not only deeply annoying, that's not smooth at all. Is it because it is because we're going through Hypersoft. We're monitoring through Hypersoft. What that really is this. Now we're going to see what the aliasing does. So fade this in. Engage Hypersoft, and we're going to be, actually, let's tune this down too. I already know it's going to be distorting so hard that I don't need to be too worried about that. So now, this is what it does when it starts aliasing. And this is what I'm going to try to avoid. Here we go. And we see the aliased things coming in. Mind you, it doesn't sound that horrible, but that is what this is doing. You're supposed to have just those and not any of these. So there's a couple of things that I can try. One of them is, let's save this stack. Then we're going to quit out of here. It's going to ask whether I want to save the document. No, I don't. Stages. Because the next thing I do is put a knob in where I can scroll in and out all of these high harmonics and see how that works with regard to whether I can stop it aliasing just by that. Because maybe I can stop it aliasing just by that. And that's going to mean doing this. We need these, but then all of these start becoming this. And don't I get mixed up in this kind of stuff and then I can't do the simplest things. So what I'm going to do is look up an example of a very simple thing, a for next loop. I'm thinking about this other thing, so I don't know how to make a for next loop. It is what it is. However, I've got them in here, I'll tell you. Let's look at it in the Finder. And it's like that. Can I select from in here? Nope. Can I view this if I click over to this? Nope. Count equals 0, count minus, count plus plus. This is the logic test. Stages. If you do plus plus count, it does the same thing, but it increments before evaluating it. And that's our loop. That loop is going to actually, we don't want to start it at 0, do we? No, we don't. We want to start it at 2, which can be less than stages. If it isn't, then it doesn't apply anything. And we need, hang on, do we even need factor at all? What am I doing? Yeah, that ain't right. I don't need factor at all. Probably. Because this is all generated out of count. And these can all be done in integer. We just don't want to actually do the calculations as integers. So here's how we do this. Give me more of that to work with. Might not need that. There. So now that's going to be I think it's going to go to a double anyhow, but that guarantees that it will. So now that is going to do the sign with the multiply of that, but then I also have to divide. So divide by power and we're not squaring, we are cubing it. And I don't believe, no wait, I need a closing parenthesis, don't I? Yep, sure did. Sure did. Actually, no, I can run power on, like it's multiplying, so it's going to give me accurate results in integer. Only thing I have to do is cast that to a double for the division. That's going to cast whatever is in the power function, which ought to be exactly what I need. And then if count is less than stages, we'll do it again. Technically, this means I can make stages be anything I want. It's doing this math for me now. We don't need any of this nonsense anymore. This little bit of math is now doing everything I could ask. And I could make it be times 200 if I wanted. That would just crash the machine. That would be bad and sadness. But and we don't need factor at all. So that's neat. And we could make stages be like plus something. Like count starts at 2. So fully to the side, it has to be less than stages. So 2 means that it's starting at save, build. This should run. Let's see if it gives me what I thought it gave me. Unhelpful. A little over 10 minutes before I force myself to quit and go have tacos. Hooray for tacos, but also hooray for doing some of this stuff. Let's see if this works. Should be able to find out just by listening. Oh wait, did I forget to copy it over? I bet I did. I bet I did. And see, it's starting to play it now because I had it showing code and then it selected something else, and then this is the thing that I need to copy over. I'm forgetting that way too easy, but like, these are hard times. I'm not going to be too grumpy about that. And it's actually going to be very quiet because I turned it down to deal with the aliasing issue. Back into the breach we go. And normalize. You know what? Let's just play with whatever it was I just made. Hypersoft. That's the one. So this is no longer a ramping up. Instead, this is just boop. So if we start increasing this, what do we get? Well, I'll tell you one thing we get. We don't benefit anything by having more than 10 because there's this funny little ripple showing up in there. See where that's altering? So we don't need to go full tilt bozo there. And our very first set of things is causing quite a lot of high harmonics. But then we add more and more. We can see how they kick in. And we can add lots and see how that works. Or we can cut it down. And see that it's adding it in a pretty clean way. They fall back quite a bit as they go. Then the next thing to do is let's play with that obnoxious aliasing sound and see what that does. I don't know if we're going to get to a point where I can neatly stop adding harmonics at a certain stage. It's worth a try. Generate tones. Here we go. Oh, that was just insert, wasn't it? We'll start over. Generate tones. There's our tone. Now, let's see what that does. Starts clean. The first thing we see is a harmonic. We're not seeing aliasing yet, although eventually we will. Yeah, this is making aliasing start to happen. It's just harder to see at that note. Like what I'm seeing is it's sort of lining up next to those. I would rather they be in between these spikes, but you can't have everything. Now let's start adding these other overtones. Boom, boom, boom. We're still not getting aliasing, but we're going to very soon. And here comes the aliasing. See how the spikes are slightly wider? I should use a different pitch. I absolutely should use a different pitch. That pitch is garbage. Maybe this pitch will be better. Let's find out. Oh, effect stacks, thank you. That way I can see it on span. Off we go. Nah, still not lining up right, man. One thing about it, I can add so many that you can see them around here. Let's pick a different pitch for our final 6 minutes of streaming. Select all. I'll pick a pitch so high everything ends up becoming aliasing. How about that? I want to see what that does. Tones. That's also very, 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 very loud. So we're going to turn the speakers off completely and preserve my tweeters. Because yikes. Okay. This is going to be all aliasing all the time. Soon as it starts doing anything. And note that as we start up, first thing we see is not actually aliasing. We're just under 10K. So the first harmonic we get is in fact 20K. Although the sharper we make this, the more we start seeing the next one that shows up, which is here. And that's kind of crazy. We've got the nearly 20K, and the next thing you know, you have a really loud 1K. That's not what you'd want. This is why people do oversampling. But yeah, a 9K tone, that's pretty aggressive. And then we crank this up. When you force it to have lots of harmonics, they will show up here. So the thing I'm thinking is if I can track this so that the slew tells me whether to kick this stuff in, we can have it so that the amplitude is like this, but then it starts doing this with it as stuff gets louder. Like, you have those harmonics if you're at a low frequency, but if you're at a high frequency, nope, they go away. If I can make that happen, that would be neat. What would that entail? Well, the first thing we need is last sample. No, we use doubles. And I have to define it in the H file. That's right here. And then having done that, we'll put a little control in there. I am wondering whether to do that with dry sample or with the result sample that we produce, because we're producing stuff that could cause, yeah, why am I doing that? Why am I doing that when I should be doing this? There we are. So now we have that. It's going to tell us how much slew factor we have going on. High frequencies are going to cause this to be larger. Really deep low frequencies, you're not going to see as much, even if they're very loud. Technically, I don't even need to create that at all. We'll see. And then this is on a stages by stages basis. So I can replace that later if this works. If slew is less than something to do with count. Let's try this. We use the same calculation. So the higher that becomes, the less range we have to do it with. Then only if slew is less than that. Oh, I can also scale it. I'm running over, I'm into taco time, but I want to see what happens. See, we can make it this way, we can make it always be less than. And this is not actually anti-aliasing. This is something else. I want to see what I can make it do. Let's build, see if it builds. What this is going to do is if slew becomes such a large number that the harmonics become too great, and that's going to be increasingly small as we go, it'll cut it out. So technically, we should be able to fire up not this, but a higher harmonic. I don't think so, no. But what I could do is just force none of this processing to happen. Haven't got there yet. Let's generate our slewy tone. That's super obnoxious, so I'm going to pick one a little bit lower than that, but too painful to actually listen to. There it is. That's the baby. Here's our thing. Here's our new output. Oh wait, no, it was, hang on. Yeah, the scale slew is D, so the rest of this is still the same. And let's see what we've got. So this is allowing all of those, but, oh, okay, that's interesting. Didn't see that coming. So we have that, but then when we start including this, it starts doing weird stuff. So if we had that and we actually applied it and looked at the waveform, what would it start looking like? We're about to find out. A funny sort of asymmetrical thing. That's what. Looks a little grungy, it does. It started out as this. So we made it a bunch quieter. It's 5:05. I can't continue, and we're not going to have this ready by next week. But I'll tell you what, I'll play some audio through it. Just as it is. Because now we have this additional control that stops this from being able to, like, let me see. So if slew is less than this thing I'm calculating out, then we apply the additional stages. If slew is greater than that, then we don't apply it, but the cutting in and out is causing other effects. Let's pick our rock and roll track for this one. So this is probably going to sound neat. It's just maybe not what we expected. Full aliasing. Yeah. So this would be none of this aliasing control. This is with it. Bright, which is not bad. That's kind of cool. I think that it can be dialed in. I think that can be dialed in to sound good. That's overly loud. That's clearly overly loud. Okay, so what I'm getting from that, B is the number of stages that we employ. And nothing much is gained by going all the way up to like 20 or so, but it's basically working. C is my output level, 0.675 turns out to be maximum clip, literally 0. And D is the amount at which it is trying to read the slew rate and cause it to calculate differently based on whether it's too much of a slew rate. And with D at 0, it's definitely over shiny and overly bright and aliasy. With D turned up, that's not stopping it from being aliasy. It's still going to be doing that, but it's focusing the highs in a useful way. So I think we have, I'm going to make a couple of notes and then I'm going to call it a day. Went a little over time, but not wildly over time. We'll dial that right back. And we'll make notes for that. And we'll quit out of there and call it a day. This is developing in a nice direction. I approve of what's happening with this. Although the horrifying thing is it's basically turning itself into another insane loudinator. Because, of course, we always need lots more of those. But I'll tell you one thing. It was doing a pretty good job being a loudinator on, like, drum recordings, like drum room recordings, where you don't hear it that way, but this is making it sound more like the way you hear it, so that's kind of cool. And some of the refinements of the algorithm seem to be good. All in all, cool. And I'll talk to you later. Who was it that was talking about what we were going to get? Let me scroll back. Lean Bear. Lean Bear is probably gone. Lean Bear asked for Stonefire Comp. Yeah. Let's give you Stonefire Comp. This isn't going to be done by the weekend, but I can give you Stonefire Comp. So let's see about that. I bet I can do that. And I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.